On December 14, 2025, two gunmen opened fire on a Jewish Hanukkah celebration, unleashing around 50 shots into a crowd of families and children. 15 people were killed. More than 40 were injured, including police officers. The youngest victim was just 10 years old. The oldest, 87er Holocaust survivor. Investigators later confirmed it was a targeted anti-Semitic terrorist attack, the worst mass shooting Australia has seen since 1996. What happened that night wasn't random. It was deliberate, and it changed Bondi on Australia forever. The attack, chaos unfolds in minutes. It began as a normal summer evening at Bondi. Families strolled along the promenade. Kids laughed and played on the sand. Music filled the air. It was warm, relaxed, and peaceful, exactly what the night was supposed to be. Then, everything changed. Without warning, two men stepped out of a car parked on Campbell Parade, the main road running parallel to the beach. Both were dressed in dark clothing. Both were carrying long-barreled firearms. And within seconds, they opened fire. Sarah Friedman was there with her daughter, attending a bar mitzvah celebration. In an instant, the joy disappeared. People began screaming, urging us to go inside. There were many children present. Essentially, it was a children's party, so a lot of kids were crying, she recalled. Sarah and her family rushed into a room behind the kitchen, crouching in fear as gunshots echoed outside. She shielded her children from the windows, praying the bullets wouldn't reach them. Another witness, Bridget, experienced the terror from the street. She was riding on the back of her partner's Vespa when she noticed one of the gunmen stepping out of a car. "I thought he was picking up crutches and felt sorry for him," she said. Then came the realization, and he just picks up the biggest gun I've ever seen and instantly opens fire. Panic took over. Bridget began screaming at the top of her lungs, shouting warnings to anyone within earshot. "Run! He has a gun! Run! He has two guns!" As they sped past people, her words spread like wildfire. One group started running, then another, until the entire beach erupted into chaos. Nathan Zlatkis had stepped outside for a cigarette when the shooting began. What he saw was horrifying. People were fleeing in all directions. "I saw two police officers lying on the ground next to me. There was blood everywhere," he said. He estimated hearing around 50 shots fired in rapid succession. The gunfire didn't stop quickly. It continued for nearly 10 minutes, a relentless barrage that left no one knowing when it would end. Nearby, Heather Nolan was having dinner at an RSL club with her children. At first, she thought the noise was firecrackers, but then she saw people running from the beach, fear written across their faces. She acted instinctively, dragging a wooden bench and pushing her children behind it for cover. Then something she'll never forget happened. A man who was bleeding sat down right next to her. "I lost track of what happened to him after someone opened the door to the changing room and ushered people inside," she said. The club turned into a makeshift refuge as terrified families hid together, unsure if the shooting was over or if it was about to reach them. On the pedestrian bridge linking the car park to the beach, Abdullah Ashraf came face to face with the horror. He saw the active shooters and immediately began shouting for people to take cover. Then he started helping the wounded. One woman had been shot twice. "We were helping her for 40 minutes, applying pressure to her injury," Abdullah said. Emergency services hadn't arrived yet. All they could do was try to stop the bleeding and hope she would survive. The gunman, a father-son duo, as police flooded the area and paramedics rushed to treat the injured. Investigators quickly identified the attackers. They were a father and son, Sajid, 50, and Naveed Akram, 24, both from Bondi. In Sydney's southwest, Sajid Akram was a licensed firearm holder who had legally owned 6 registered guns for around 10 years. All 6 firearms were recovered at the scene. 2 neighbors and people in the community. He was known as a fruit shop owner, a small business operator, someone who appeared ordinary. His son Naveed lived a much quieter life. An unemployed bricklayer, he had lost his job about 2 months earlier after his employer went bankrupt. His mother, Verena, described him as reserved and withdrawn. "He doesn't have a firearm. He doesn't even go out. He doesn't mix around with friends. He doesn't drink. He doesn't smoke. He doesn't go to bad places," she said. She insisted he was the kind of son anyone would wish to have, focused on work, fitness, and family. Before the attack, the 2 men told relatives they were heading on a fishing trip to Jervis Bay. On Sunday morning, Naveed even called his mother, claiming he and his father had gone scuba diving and would stay home because of the heat. It wasn't true. Instead, they arrived at Bondi Beach at 6:47 p.m. on a night that would become one of the darkest in Australian history, and the country's worst mass shooting since 1996. To this day, the exact motive remains unclear. Authorities said they had little knowledge of either man beforehand. A CO later confirmed that one of them was known to the agency, but not in an immediate threat perspective. What was clear, however, was the target, a Jewish Hanukkah celebration, families, children, a sacred holiday. For investigators and for the nation, there was no doubt. This was an anti-Semitic terrorist attack. The hero in the chaos, Ahmad al-Ahmedin, the middle of fear, screams, and gunfire. One ordinary man did something extraordinary. His name is Ahmad al-Ahmad. He's 43 years old, a fruit shop owner, a husband, a father of two from Sutherland, in Sydney. Not a police officer, not a soldier, just a man who happened to be there when everything went wrong. As one of the gunmen stood on the pedestrian bridge, firing into the crowd below, Ahmed watched from behind a parked car on Campbell Parade. He had no weapon, no protection, no backup. And yet, in a split second, he made a choice. The footage that followed is hard to watch, impossible to forget. Ahmed suddenly bursts from behind the car and runs straight at the shooter. No hesitation, no pause. He tackles the gunman from behind, driving him low and knocking him off balance. In the struggle, Ahmed grabs hold of the rifle with his bare hands and fights to wrestle it free. Astonishingly, he succeeds. Then, turning the weapon toward the attacker, Ahmed forces the gunman backward, driving him toward the bridge, where the shooter's father was positioned. But heroism doesn't come without a price. The second gunman, still firing from above, shot Ahmed twice, once in the arm, once in the hand. Even after being hit, Ahmed didn't let go. He didn't freeze. He didn't run. His actions, caught on camera and later shared across the world, stopped the attack from becoming even deadlier. There is little doubt his bravery saved lives. Ahmed was rushed to hospital and underwent surgery for his gunshot wounds. While he was recovering, his cousin Mustafa spoke to the media, saying simply, "He's a hero, 100% a hero." NSW Premier Chris Minns was just as direct. "I have no doubt that many lives were saved due to his courage. That man is a genuine hero." Prime Minister Anthony Albanese echoed that sentiment, praising Ahmed alongside police and first responders, saying they had all rushed towards peril to assist others. What makes Ahmed's story so powerful isn't just what he did, it's who he is. He isn't trained for combat. He isn't paid to run toward danger. He's a shopkeeper, a family man, someone who, in the worst possible moment, didn't think about himself. He acted, and in doing so, he showed that heroism doesn't belong only to uniforms or titles. Sometimes, it belongs to the person who decides right there, in the chaos, not to look away. The victims' faces behind the numbers are easy to say. 15 dead, 40 injured. But numbers don't tell you who was lost. Rabbi Eli Schlanger was 41 years old. He was the assistant rabbi at Shabbat Bondi, the very celebration that was under attack. Originally from Britain, he had lived in Sydney for 18 years and had just welcomed his 5th child into the world. His brother-in-law Mendelastel told Reuters the family was broken. "They've fallen apart." He said Schlanger's wife didn't just lose her husband, she also lost her best friend's husband in the same attack. The two couples had been close since university. Now she was left to raise 5 children, alone, the youngest only months old. Dan Elkiam was in his late 20s. A French national, he had been working in Sydney since December as a technical support provider for NBC Universal. He was celebrating Hanukkah at a beach that would soon be forever tied to tragedy. French President Emmanuel Macron issued a statement following his death. "It is with profound sorrow that I learn of the passing of our compatriot Dan Elkiam." Alex Kleitman was 87 years old, a Holocaust survivor from Ukraine. Think about that. A man who survived one of history's greatest atrocities, only to be killed decades later in another act of hatred. He was at the celebration with his children and grandchildren. When the gunfire started, he shielded his wife, Larissa. He didn't survive. He left behind his wife, 2 children, and 11 grandchildren. Then there was Matilda, 10 years old. She was a primary school student at the Harmony Russian School. Friends and teachers described her as joyful and full of life. She was at the beach with her family, doing what children do, laughing, enjoying the moment. Her future ended in seconds. Other victims included Rabbi Yaakov Levitan, secretary of the Sydney Jewish religious organization Beth Din; Reuven Morrison, a businessman originally from the former Soviet Union who split his time between Melbourne and Sydney; and Tibor, a husband and father who died trying to protect his wife from the gunfire. There were more. People with careers, families, plans for the future. The youngest victim was just 10 years old. The oldest was 7. Families were destroyed, communities were shaken, and the country was forced to face a brutal truth. Hatred doesn't choose its victims carefully. It strikes the innocent, the vulnerable, the ones who never thought they'd be in its path. And in one night, celebration turned into loss that can never be undone. The immediate aftermath, shock and response. By 7 p.m., Bondi Beach no longer looked like a place of celebration. It looked like a war zone. More than 40 people had been rushed to hospitals across Sydney. 2 police officers were among the wounded, both shot while responding to the attack. 5 victims were listed in critical condition. Paramedics worked, non-stop, treating the injured where they lay, carrying bodies off the sand, and trying to bring order to a scene that was still unfolding. Police had exchanged gunfire with both attackers. Sajid Akram, the 50-year-old father, was shot dead at the scene by officers. His son, 24-year-old Naveed Akram, was captured alive but critically injured. He was taken to hospital under heavy police guard. As officers continued sweeping the area, they made a discovery that shifted the entire investigation. Inside a vehicle linked to one of the suspects, police found improvised explosive device, IEDs. A bomb squad was immediately called in to safely remove them. What had already been devastating was now even more disturbing. This was no longer being treated as just a mass shooting. It pointed to something larger: planned terrorism. Entire neighborhoods were locked down. Streets were sealed off. Homes were raided. Police executed search warrants in Bondi and Campsie, digging for answers how the attack was planned, what motivated it, and whether anyone else was involved. Bondi Beach itself became an exclusion zone as bomb-sniffing dogs and specialist teams combed every inch of the area. In the early hours of Monday morning, NSW Police Commissioner Mal Lanyon stood before the cameras and made it official. This was a terrorist attack. Soon after, Prime Minister Anthony Albanese addressed the nation. What we witnessed was an act of pure evil, an act of anti-Semitism, an act of terrorism on our shores in an iconic Australian location, he said. He continued, Bondi is a place associated with joy, associated with families gathering, associated with celebrations, and it is forever tarnished by what has occurred. A global response, solidarity and condemnation. What happened at Bondi Beach didn't stay in Australia. The shock traveled fast, across borders, across cultures, across faiths. World leaders responded with rare unity. U.S. President Donald Trump called it a terrible attack and described it as a purely anti-Semitic assault. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu condemned the vile terrorist who targeted Jews celebrating Hanukkah. Leaders from the United Kingdom, Italy, Iran, Qatar, France, and many other nations issued statements of solidarity. This wasn't seen as just an Australian tragedy. It was understood for what it was: an attack on the right to live freely, safely, and without fear because of one's faith. One of the most powerful responses came from within Australia's Muslim community. The Australian National Imams Council released a statement saying, "Our hearts, thoughts, and prayers are with the victims, their families, and all those impacted by this deeply traumatic event. This is a moment for all Australians, including the Muslim community, to unite in compassion and solidarity." Their message carried weight. They recognized that extremism aimed at one group threatens everyone. The Board of Deputies of British Jews reached out to the Australian Jewish community, emphasizing that the challenges posed by terrorism and anti-Semitism are global issues that require united and determined efforts to overcome. Across the world, Jewish communities from London to Toronto held vigils. Candles were lit, prayers were said, names were spoken aloud. Back home, Prime Minister Albanese announced a whole-of-government response. On behalf of all Australians, I express our solidarity with the Jewish community. We embrace you and affirm that you have every right to be proud of your identity and beliefs. There is no room for hate, violence, or terrorism in our nation, he said. He pledged full support, protection, and decisive action moving forward. The bigger picture: rising anti-Semitism. As shocking as the Bondi Beach attack was, it didn't happen in isolation. Australia, like many Western countries, has seen a troubling rise in anti-Semitic incidents in recent years, and the timing of this attack made the message unmistakable. It happened on the first night of Hanukkah holiday, centered on light, resilience, and hope. Families were targeted during a moment meant for celebration and safety. This was not random. This was not spontaneous. This was deliberate, a calculated act of terrorism aimed at a specific religious community. For a nation that prides itself on multiculturalism, the attack forced a hard reckoning. How does hatred take root? How does it go unnoticed until it turns violent? Investigators later confirmed that one of the attackers had been known to ASIO, though not considered an immediate threat. That revelation raised uncomfortable questions. Were there warning signs? Could this have been prevented? And how can authorities identify radicalization before it reaches a breaking point? Those questions remain. But what is clear is this: the attack on Bondi Beach wasn't just an assault on a celebration, it was an attack on the idea that people should be able to gather, worship, and live without fear. And that reality has left a scar that won't fade easily. The road forward: a nation in reflection. In the days that followed, Australia fell into a quiet pause. Bondi Beach, usually alive with noise, movement, and summer energy, was silent. What had once symbolized freedom and joy became a place of grief. Flowers lined the promenade. Candles flickered in the wind. Handwritten notes appeared everywhere, messages of love and disbelief left by strangers trying to process the unthinkable. The emotional damage runs deep. Those who witnessed the attack will carry those moments for the rest of their lives. Survivors now live with trauma, with flashbacks, with the weight of survivors' guilt. Families are left navigating a future without parents, children, partners. And the Jewish community gathered that night in celebration and hope was forced to confront a painful reality. Hatred still exists, and it can strike anywhere, without warning. Yet alongside the grief, another story emerged. a story of resilience. Ahmed Ahmed's decision to run toward danger arms showed that courage isn't reserved for uniforms or titles. It's a choice made in a single moment, and the response that followed from Australians of every background, Muslim and Jewish, Christian and secular, proved something just as powerful. Extremism does not define who we are. In response to the attack, police launched Operation Shelter. Across the country, 328 officers were deployed to protect Jewish communities and places of worship. Their presence wasn't just about security, it was about reassurance. A clear message that vulnerable communities would not be left to face fear alone. Conclusion: when celebration met chaos, the Bondi Beach shooting of December 14, 2025, stands as one of the darkest chapters in modern Australian history. A night meant for celebration became a scene of terror. Innocent lives were taken, including a child and a Holocaust survivor. A sense of safety that many Australians had long taken for granted was shattered in minutes. But that night also revealed something else. It revealed the strength of ordinary people. It showed how communities can stand together across faiths and cultures. And it reminded the country that even in moments shaped by hate, hope can still exist. The victims will not be forgotten. Rabbi Elish, Dan Elk, Alex Clayton, Matilda, and the others whose lives were cut short. They deserve to be remembered not for how they died, but for how they lived. They deserve to celebrate Hanukkah in peace. They deserved their future. Ahmed Ahmad will recover from his physical injuries, but what he did that night has already left a deeper mark. His courage restored something shaken across the nation. He reminded Australia that we are not powerless in the face of evil, that we can act, that we can protect one another, even at great personal cost. Bondi Beach will move forward. The community will heal. Life will return. But on December 14, 2025, during those 10 minutes of chaos and gunfire, Australia was changed forever. The challenge now is what comes next. To learn from this tragedy, to strengthen our communities, to confront the hatred that fuels violence, and to make sure that a celebration like this is never again turned into chaos.